Good morning. It's time for episode number 26 of our study of the book of Genesis. This is Genesis chapter 14, verses 1 through 17. We are following along with the exploits of Abram. Abram is a man who is going to fall under the promise of God. God is going to promise incredible things to Abram. Abram's name will eventually be changed to Abraham, but Abram is going to demonstrate incredible faith as he keeps moving forward in his relationship with God and his following God into the promised land. Abram is living in the place where God wants the Israelite nation to be. Abram, who has no children, will be a father, and he will be a father of not just one child, but it will lead to a multitudes of people that will be his descendants. His descendants will be so incredibly numerous that you can't even possibly count all of them. That is an incredible nation that's going to come out of Abraham, who will be the father of this nation, and God's hand is with him. As we turn to chapter 14, verses 1 through 17, again, we're going to be with Abram for several chapters here in the book of Genesis, because he really is the patriarch of the entire nation. As we are with him, following along in the exploits of Abram, we are going to see, again, God's hand with him, incredible faith. Today, what we're going to see in chapter 14 is a lot of commentary. There's going to be a battle that is going to take place. There is a rebellion of a group of 5 kings. This rebellion of 5 kings is going to pull Abram into the battle. Abram is going to be pulled into the battle because of his nephew Lot. Lot, who had gone and parted ways with Abram. Lot, who had taken the lands, who were in the Sodom and Gomorrah area, where Abram was in what we know really is modern day Israel. That's the area that Abram would have been. And in all of this, Abram is going to be pulled into these battles and pulled into this conflict because of his nephew. That's the reason he's going to be pulled into this. So let's read through a lot of this commentary. There's going to be a lot of names that I'm not going to be able to completely pronounce, but bear with me as we read through this, and you could follow along, and maybe you could try to pronounce them as well if I mess up on a few of these names. So let's read through this together. We're going to pick it up here in chapter 14. We're going to read verses 1 through 17 today. At least I'm going to read that. I'm going to struggle through some of these names. You can follow along, and I'm going to read probably the next 3 slides and not stop and do any commentary. The first 3 slides really contain the first 10 verses, and that's really what I want to get through here, because these first 10 verses really give the story of what's going on. So we'll try to wade through the story and understand. I know there's a lot of commentary, or there's a lot of history here that you may not be aware of, but we'll try to pull it all together after I read the first probably 3 slides through this, 3 to 4 slides. Let's look at this together. And again, I'm going to struggle as I read these names, but you can follow along with me. Excuse me. It came to pass in the days of Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, and Tidal, king of nations, that they made war with Bera, king of Sodom, Bersha, king of Gomorrah, Shinab, king of Admah, Shemimber, king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zoar. All these joined together in the valley of Sidon, that is the sea salt. So all of these kings are coming together, and there's this battle that is going on. 12 years they served the one king that I had already mentioned, Kedor-laomer, and in the 13th year, all of these groups rebelled. So they came together, they did a battle, then they began to serve this one, and now in the 13th year, they rebelled. Now in the 14th year, this Kedorlaomer and the kings that were with him came and attacked Rephaim in Asheroth, Karnam, the Zuzim in Ham, the Emim in Shaveh Kiriathaim, and the Horites in their mountain of Seir, as far as El Paran, which is by the wilderness. Then they turned back and came to En Mesphat, that is Kadesh, and attacked all the country of the Amalekites, and also the Amorites who dwelt in the Hazazon Tamar, and the king of Sodom, the king of Gomorrah, the king of Admah, the king of Zeboim, and the king of Bela, that is Zor, went out and joined together in battle in the valley of Sedom against Kedorlaomer, king of Elam, Tidal, king of nations, Amraphel, king of Shinar, and Arioch, king of Elasar, 4 kings against 5. So you have 9 groups, 9 kingdoms, or 9 kings over a small area that are coming together, and they are doing battle. 4 of the kings joined together, 5 of the kings joined together, and they fought together in this region. Now, this region is going to be the Middle Eastern region that we know of today. So if you look at a map, you look at Israel, and you look at the lands from Israel, you look at Syria, you look at Jordan, you look at the areas of maybe as far as Turkey to the north. Then you go to the east, and you're going to find Iran. You're going to find Iraq. This is the general area. Now, this area has always been full of conflict, and they're full of conflict then, and they're full of conflict today. It's always been the center of where all of the conflicts of the Bible really are centralized in. So this is nothing new. So 4 against 5 that are fighting this battle. Now, the valley of Sedom was full of asphalt pits, and the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. Some fell there, and the remainder fled to the mountains. Then they took all the goods of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions and went their way. They also took Lot, Abram's brother's son, so Abram's nephew, who dwelt in Sodom, and his goods, and departed. So what is going on? Well, the kings of those days are no different than the kings of our days today. The people who lived in Canaan in the days of Abram were like humanity in general. They were really interested in conquest and domination. They were interested in greed. They were interested in taking possession. This confederation of kings who rebelled against King, who was Kedorlaomer, they wanted to be free from his dominion, and so they rebelled against him, and that created this battle that was going on. There were asphalt pits. This was around the Dead Sea area. This was encompassing the Middle Eastern area. We don't know how far this stretched, but it stretched into the Middle Eastern area. And we know that the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah were part of this, and they were defeated. The kings of Sodom and Gomorrah were defeated. So much so that the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. They ran away. Some fell in the asphalt pits. In other words, these burning pits, these mini pits that were there, some fell into those. Some fled to the mountains. But the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah were beaten, and all of the possessions and the provisions were taken that belonged to Sodom and Gomorrah, including Abram's nephew, Lot, who lived there among Sodom and Gomorrah. And I find it really interesting that it notes this. Since Lot lived among the wicked people of Sodom, we are not surprised that he was taken captive. Now, there's an incredible principle that is at play here in this little verse, that they also took Lot, Abram's brother's son, who dwelt in Sodom. He chose to live among the wicked people. As a result of that, he was easy prey, and he was taken, and his possessions were taken because he chose to live there. Now, Charles Spurgeon said this about that statement. He said, "Those believers who conform to the world must expect to suffer for it. The more you put yourself in harm's way, the more you choose to walk and be in the wicked situation." Now, that doesn't mean that you're in the world and you have to rub shoulders with some groups of people that you may disagree with, but this was willful choosing to participate in the world system. That's what Lot was doing. Lot willfully chose to participate in the systems of Sodom and Gomorrah. It was a very wicked place. It was a very sinful place, and that's the place that Lot chose to set up his life, his household, He chose to have family there. He chose to participate in this. The more you choose to participate in the world's system, the more you will pay the price, and the more you could possibly suffer by being in the world system. As a Christian, we are called to be separate from the world. We are called out of the world system into God's heavenly kingdom. We are called to walk according to his system, not the world's system. And that's exactly what was going on. Well, as a result of this, because Abram's brother's son, so Abram's nephew Lot, because he was taken captive, now this is going to directly impact Abram, who was trying to follow the Lord. Abram is going to be drawn into a battle because his nephew was taken captive. Abram is going to hear about Lot's captivity. He's going to hear about what happened, and Abram is going to put an army together and go and attack these groups that just took his nephew. He is much, I'm sure, very family focused and family oriented, and he is going to defend his family. So let's read about that. Then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew what had happened, for he dwelt by the terebinth trees of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol, the brother of Aner, and they were allies with Abram. Now when Abram heard that his brother was taken captive, he armed his 318 trained servants who were born in his own house and went in pursuit as far as Dan. So Abram, this is his desire is to go after and help his relative, the one who was taken captive. Abram was living in an area where he did have allies, he did have friends, he had built relationships there. He also had a very large household. He had 318 servants. He had a great wealth. This demonstrates the great wealth of Abram to be able to have 318 servants that were in his household. And these 318 were the ones that were capable of fighting. There must have been more women and children who were not capable of fighting, so the number of servants that he had was probably double or maybe even triple that number of 318. So he may have very well had 1,000 servants when you add in the women and the children that were part of this. Now, of the 318 that were trained, they were ready to go to war. They knew how to battle. They knew how to fight. Abram was a man who had walked in faith, yet he was also a very prudent man. Abram kept his own personal army, and he apparently kept them trained and ready to defend his interests. That really goes a long way, I think, to say about how we process life and how we handle situations that come our way, maybe even end time situations that come our way. You know, the question of should a Christian fight? Should a Christian go into battle? And the question for that is, according to what Abram just did, Abram didn't engage in the battle at the beginning. But when Abram's family was attacked, Abram didn't back down. Abram was prudent enough to walk by faith, yet also prepare himself for whatever battle lay before him. He was not stupid. He was not ignorant. He was not unwise and foolish. He had an army prepared and ready to go. You know, there's a different idea in the Bible. Should a Christian have a firearm, or should a Christian, if a family is being attacked, should they defend themselves? So that's an ongoing debate theologically that I don't know if there's a great answer for. Other than the fact, in the Bible, there's a very real distinct difference between murder and killing in the Bible. Murder was a premeditated wanting to take somebody's life, usually out of revenge or out of an evil intent of the heart. Killing was oftentimes very justified in the Bible, and there were varieties of reasons. One, killing was done for self-defense. It was done for capital punishment when there was a crime that was fitting of that. They had capital punishment, and those killings were just. They were justified. They were actually commanded in the Bible in many different situations. So you had self-defense, you had just, capital punishment, and then you had military situations like this where a military person is not really murdering when they are fighting in this military because there's no evil intent of the heart, but they are defending what is rightfully theirs to defend, or they're following what their leader or their country is saying to do. And there were times that was very justified as well. So it's an interesting discussion. It's an interesting thought to be thinking about the difference between murder and killing, the difference between self-protection and defense versus going out intentionally wanting to destroy. There's a difference between your family being attacked versus, versus just trying to provoke and take by greed and coveting, which is what some of these other kings were doing. So it's an interesting thought to think about, and I would challenge you to do so. Well, Abram, in his prudence, had an army ready to go. He had trained them. He had kept them trained. He had kept them ready for defense. He wasn't looking for a fight, but he wasn't going to walk away from a fight, especially when one of his family members was taken. So he began to pursue the confederacy of the four kings a long distance. So he went to as far as the city of Dan, and this would have been basically around the northern border of Israel. So probably from the southern part of Israel to the northern part of Israel was about as far as he pursued these kings who had taken his family member. Well, let's wrap it up with 3 more verses. He, that is Abram, divided his forces against them by night. So he used prudence and he attacked them at night. Abram had military wisdom when it came to fighting this battle. He used a very clever tactic of a night attack by splitting his army into 2 groups. So he pursued them. He and his servants attacked them, and he pursued them as far as Hobah, which is north of Damascus. So this is again going north. So he brought back all the goods, excuse me, and also brought back his brother Lot and his goods, as well as the women and the people. Now, we know that this wasn't really his brother. This was his nephew, but this was his brother's son. So he is taking on that role of being brother and really fulfilling what the role of his brother would have fulfilled, to be the leader and the head of that part of the family. So he brought back his brother Lot, his goods, as well as the women and the people. The king of Sodom, who remember had fled from the battle earlier, went out to meet Abram in the valley of Shaveh, that is the King's Valley, after his return from the defeat of Kedorlaomer and the kings who were with him. So that is the end of this little section. He attacked in wisdom. He divided his army. He attacked at night. He fought. He wasn't a part of the initial fight. That wasn't the battle that he was concerned about. But when his family member was attacked, then Abram stepped in. He had the army ready to go. His army was prepared and had trained for this time. They weren't looking for a fight, but they did not back away from a fight. They went. They defeated this army, this group of 4 kings who had fled to the north. They rescued Lot. They rescued all of Lot's family, all of the goods. All of the things were brought back. The king of Sodom realized just how valuable Abram was and came to greet him in this valley of the kings. Now, what's going to be very interesting is that after he rescues Lot, Lot is going to move right back to where he was before the battle took place. He's going to go right back to Sodom, right back to that wicked situation. He should have learned from this entire event that he should not put himself in harm's way. He should move away from that and be a part of where God wanted them to be. But he did not listen to God, and he is going to later pay the price because he refused to listen to God and refused this warning from the Lord. We see a story here of Abram's rescue of Lot. We are rescued from lives of sin and shame by the Lord himself, by our Redeemer. Now, Abram was considered a kinsman redeemer in the life of Lot. He was the Redeemer. He set him free. He rescued him from the captivity that he was in. We have been rescued and been set free by Jesus, who as he is our kinsman redeemer. He has set us free. And when you are set free, he does not expect you to go right back into a life of sin, go right back to the life that you were in before you got set free. He expects you to move into the newness of life. Don't go back to the old system. Don't go back to the old way. Don't go right back into the old life after you have been set free. And I hope for you, as you have accepted the Lord, that you have not gone right back into the old life that God set you free from. Well, that's all we have for today. Next time we will be in Genesis chapter 4. We'll pick it up in verse 18, and we will see Abram meeting this priest called the priest of Melchizedek. He is also called the king of Salem. He's the priest of the God Most High. We met him when we went through our Hebrew study, but now we are going to see him in the book of Genesis. And again, this is most likely Jesus showing up on the scene in the Old Testament. Thanks for joining me today, and I hope you'll join me back here next time. Until then, have a wonderful rest of your day.